I'm Lydia, 29, the forgotten middle child between my perfect older sister Emma and golden boy younger brother Noah. 3 months in the hospital after my car accident left me with spinal injuries and third-degree burns, yet my parents never visited once, not a single time. Then a year later, they suddenly appeared at my apartment doorstep crying and desperate, needing something only I could give them. Before I tell you what my parents wanted after ignoring me during the worst time of my life, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt invisible in your own family. Growing up in Wellesley, an affluent suburb of Boston, meant living in a world where appearances mattered above all else. Our 5-bedroom colonial with its manicured lawn and heated pool was the perfect backdrop for the perfect family my parents wanted everyone to believe we were. My father, Richard, was a corporate attorney whose 60-hour work weeks paid for our privileged lifestyle. My mother, Catherine, a former Massachusetts beauty queen, had leveraged her connections and perfect smile into a thriving real estate business, selling multi-million-dollar homes to other families just like ours. From the outside, we were the American dream. From the inside, we were a carefully orchestrated performance where each child had their assigned role, and mine was always to be not quite enough. Emma, my older sister by 3 years, was the golden child from day one. With her natural blonde hair, our mother's striking blue eyes, and our father's analytical mind, she was the perfect combination of both parents. By the time I was forming memories, Emma was already collecting awards, perfect report cards, and our parents' undivided attention. She was valedictorian, earned a full scholarship to Yale, met her surgeon husband during her sophomore year, and gave my parents their first grandchild before she turned 27. Emma did everything right on schedule, and with the kind of effortless grace that made everyone else feel inadequate. Then there was Noah, 5 years younger than me. The baby of the family, the only boy, the child whose birth made our family complete, according to my mother. With his dimpled smile and natural athletic ability, Noah charmed his way through childhood. His baseball games were family events that required attendance from everyone. When he got a baseball scholarship to college, my parents threw him a party that cost more than the down payment on my first apartment. And then there was me, Lydia, stuck in the middle. I wasn't as academically gifted as Emma or as naturally charismatic as Noah. I was just me. Good at school, but not exceptional. Interested in art rather than sports or debate club. Quiet when they wanted outgoing, outspoken when they wanted compliance. I wore the wrong clothes, chose the wrong friends, and ultimately pursued the wrong career, at least according to my parents. My childhood is a catalog of moments where my achievements were footnotes to my siblings' headlines. When I was 8, I won first place in a school art contest. The award ceremony fell on the same night as one of Emma's dance recitals. "We'll see your picture later," my mother said, patting my head as they rushed out the door in their formal wear. My babysitter took me to receive my award. When I was 16, I was selected to have my artwork displayed in a young artist's showcase at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. It was a huge honor that my art teacher had encouraged me to apply for. The showcase was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon. "That's Noah's championship game," my father reminded me when I showed them the invitation. "You know we can't miss that. Maybe you can take some pictures for us." I went alone on the bus and pretended not to notice the other students with their proud parents taking photos. My high school graduation landed during the same week that Emma got engaged. Guess which event dominated all family conversations and phone calls to relatives? When I announced that I had been accepted to Pratt Institute for their digital arts program, my father's first question was how much it would cost, followed quickly by suggestions for more practical schools with business programs. My mother simply asked if I was sure I wouldn't rather stay closer to home, like Emma did. For 18 years, I tried to find my place in a family that had already assigned all the important roles to my siblings. By the time I turned 22 and moved to New York to pursue my career in digital art and design, I had accepted that I would always be an afterthought to my parents. The distance from Boston to New York wasn't just geographical, it was emotional breathing room. Those first years in New York were transformative. For the first time, I was judged on my own merits, rather than in comparison to my siblings. I started as a junior designer at a small marketing firm, lived in a tiny apartment with a roommate, and gradually built a life that was authentically mine. My boss recognized my talent for creating emotionally resonant digital illustrations, and within 2 years, I was handling key client accounts. I made friends who actually wanted to hear my opinions, who celebrated my successes and supported me through failures. My roommate Maya became the sister I wished I'd had growing up. We shared everything from clothes to secrets, and her family welcomed me for holidays when returning to Boston felt too draining. Contact with my own family dwindled to obligatory holiday calls, the occasional visit when Emma had another baby, or Noah graduated from college. Each interaction followed the same pattern: polite questions about my work that barely masked their disapproval, not so subtle hints about settling down before it's too late, and the inevitable comparisons to my siblings' more traditional paths. "Your cousin Sarah just made partner at her law firm," my mother would say during our monthly calls, "and she has 2 children already." "Noah's been scouted by 3 different investment firms," my father announced during one Thanksgiving visit. "Starting salary would be twice what you're making with your drawings." I learned to deflect to smile to change the subject. I learned to keep the most meaningful parts of my life private because they wouldn't understand the value of what I had built. By 28, I had my own one-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn, a senior position at a respected design agency, and a circle of friends who felt more like family than the people who shared my DNA. I wasn't unhappy. I had made peace with the reality of my family dynamics and found fulfillment elsewhere. I called my parents regularly out of duty, sent appropriate gifts for birthdays and anniversaries, and maintained a cordial distance. If I occasionally felt a pang when seeing other families where all children were equally celebrated, I pushed it aside. This was my normal, and I had adapted. Then came the night that changed everything. December 15th, just 10 days before Christmas. I was working late on a client project trying to finish before the holiday break. It was raining heavily, one of those bone-chilling New York winter rains that seep through every layer of clothing. By the time I packed up my laptop, it was after 10 p.m. and the streets were slick with a dangerous mix of rain, sleet, and earlier snowfall. I called a taxi rather than risk the subway and a long walk in such weather. The yellow cab pulled up and I slid into the back seat, giving the driver my address in Brooklyn. We were halfway over the bridge when it happened. Headlights coming toward us, the driver swerving to avoid a stalled car, the sickening sensation of tires losing their grip on wet pavement. The taxi spun once, twice, then slammed into the guardrail before being hit by another vehicle unable to stop in time. What followed was a confused blur of pain, noise, and terror. The crunch of metal, the shattering of glass, the sudden heat as something in the engine caught fire. I remember trying to open my door and finding it crushed against my right side. I remember the burning sensation spreading across my arm and shoulder as flames began to lick into the back seat. I remember screaming for help as someone outside shouted for me to cover my face. Then nothing but darkness. I woke up in the burn unit of New York Presbyterian Hospital 3 days later. The world was a haze of pain medication and beeping machines. Through the fog, I heard a nurse explaining that I had been in a serious accident. I had suffered a spinal fracture that required immediate surgery, third-degree burns across my right arm and shoulder, 4 broken ribs, and a punctured lung. I had been in surgery for 8 hours and would need multiple follow-up procedures for the burns. "Is anyone here for me?" I remember asking, my voice barely a whisper through parched lips. The nurse hesitated before answering. "Your emergency contact, Maya, has been here since you were brought in. She just went to get some coffee. She'll be right back." Maya. Not my parents, not my siblings. My roommate from 4 years ago who had moved to her own place but remained my best friend. When Maya returned, her eyes red from crying and lack of sleep, she gently took my left hand, the one not covered in bandages. "I called your parents," she said quietly. "As soon as they told me how serious it was, I left messages. I sent texts with updates after your surgery." I didn't need to ask what their response had been. The answer was in Maya's careful avoidance of eye contact in the empty room save for her presence. "They're not coming, are they?" I whispered. "Your mom called back yesterday," Maya said, finally meeting my gaze. She said they have commitments they can't break. Your dad has a big case going to trial. She mentioned something about the weather making travel difficult." The weather. The weather was their excuse for not coming to see their daughter who had nearly burned to death, who had just had her spine pieced back together with metal rods, who was lying in a hospital bed 3 states away. I closed my eyes, a different kind of pain washing over me. "It's okay," I said, though it wasn't. "I'm used to it." Maya stayed. She slept in the uncomfortable chair beside my bed for weeks, leaving only to shower and change clothes. She coordinated with my coworkers who set up a schedule to bring food magazines and company. My boss came himself bringing flowers and the news that my job would be waiting whenever I was ready to return, even if that meant working remotely at first. My landlord, a gruff Polish immigrant I had barely spoken to beyond exchanging rent checks, stopped by with his wife. They brought homemade soup and told me not to worry about the next 2 months' rent. "You focus on getting better," he said in his thick accent. "Apartment will wait for you." The physical therapist assigned to my case, Denise, became my drill sergeant and cheerleader rolled into one. "You're going to walk out of here," she promised during our first session, when even sitting upright sent spasms of pain through my damaged spine. "It's going to hurt like hell, but you're going to do it." The burn specialist, Dr. Patel, explained the long process of debridement grafting and reconstruction that would be necessary to repair the damage to my arm and shoulder. "You'll have scars," she said honestly, "but we'll minimize them as much as possible." Through it all, the excruciating physical therapy sessions, the burn treatments that left me sobbing in pain the nights when sleep wouldn't come because of the discomfort, not once did my parents visit. There were brief phone calls, always at times when they knew I'd likely be in therapy or treatment. They left voicemails expressing concern, but offering excuses for why they couldn't make the trip. "Your father's trial is at a critical stage," my mother explained 3 weeks after my accident. "We're planning to come when things settle down a bit," she said at the 6-week mark. "Noah has midterms coming up and we promised we'd help him prepare," was the excuse at 2 months. Emma called twice, her conversations brief and distracted by her children crying in the background. "Mom says you're doing better," she said, never asking me directly about my condition. "That's good to hear." Noah sent a text message with a generic, "Get well soon," and an emoji of a hospital. It was the kind of message you might send to a casual acquaintance, not your sister who nearly died. The contrast between my biological family's absence and my chosen family's presence couldn't have been starker. Maya organized a rotation of friends to stay with me after I was finally discharged, ensuring I was never alone during those first challenging weeks at home. Coworkers set up meal deliveries. My boss arranged for all my work equipment to be set up in my apartment so I could contribute to projects from home when I felt up to it. Depression hit hard during the darkest days of recovery. There were mornings when the pain was so intense, the future so uncertain that getting out of bed seemed impossible. The burns required constant care, the nerve damage caused unpredictable spasms, and the spinal injury meant I couldn't sit or stand for long periods without pain. Simple tasks like washing my hair or preparing a meal became monumental challenges. It was during this period that I turned back to my art as both therapy and escape. Unable to sit at my computer for long stretches, I taught myself to create digital art using my left hand and a tablet I could use while lying down. The results were different from my previous work, rawer, more emotional, less technically perfect, but somehow more authentic. I started posting these pieces online, not expecting much response. To my surprise, they resonated with people. Comments poured in from others who had experienced trauma, who understood the language of pain and resilience I was expressing through my art. A small online following grew, and I opened a simple shop selling prints and digital downloads. What began as therapy became a lifeline both emotionally and financially. The medical bills were staggering even with insurance. The additional income from my art sales helped cover expenses my regular salary couldn't, allowing me to focus on healing rather than financial stress. Slowly, painfully, I rebuilt my life around my new limitations. I adapted my apartment with the help of friends, installing grab bars in the bathroom, rearranging furniture to create wider pathways for the days when I needed a cane, setting up an ergonomic workstation that put less strain on my back. I developed routines around pain management: when to take medications, when to rest, when to push through discomfort for the sake of progress. Through it all, one reality remained constant: my parents' absence. Their excuses evolved with the seasons. Too busy with work visiting Emma's children, helping Noah with his internship applications. But the result was the same. They did not come. Not once during the 3 months of my hospitalization. Not once during the grueling 9 months of recovery that followed. I stopped expecting them to. I stopped hoping for it. I learned to find family in the people who showed up, who saw my pain and didn't look away, who celebrated my small victories as if they were Olympic medals. By the 1-year anniversary of the accident, I had achieved what my doctors called a remarkable recovery. I still had chronic pain. I still had days when my right arm was too stiff and painful to use effectively. I still needed a cane when fatigue or pain flared up, but I was working full-time again, splitting my hours between the office and home. My online art business had grown to provide a steady secondary income. I had reclaimed my independence and built a life that accommodated my new reality. I had just finished a video call with a client when my doorbell rang that Tuesday afternoon. It was unusual. Most of my friends texted before stopping by, knowing that I sometimes needed to prepare myself for visitors. Package deliveries usually went to the building's main desk. When I opened the door, the last people I expected to see were standing in my hallway. My parents. They looked different than I remembered. My father's hair had more gray and deep lines framed his mouth. My mother, always impeccably put together, had visible dark circles under her eyes despite her makeup. They stood close together, my father's arm around my mother's shoulders, in a protective gesture I rarely saw between them. "Lydia," my mother said, her voice wavering slightly. "May we come in?" I stood frozen in the doorway, my brain struggling to process their unexpected presence. It had been 1 year and 3 months since the accident, over 1 year since they had promised to visit soon, and never did. "Why are you here?" I asked, not moving from my position blocking the entrance. "Please," my father said, his voice lacking its usual authoritative tone. "We need to talk to you. It's important." Something in his uncharacteristic humility made me step aside. They entered my apartment, their eyes scanning the space as if cataloging every detail. I was suddenly conscious of how different my home was from their traditional, perfectly decorated house. My walls were covered in artwork, some my own, others from artist friends. Bright colors, unconventional furniture adaptations for my accessibility needs, nothing like the neutral palettes and antique furniture my mother preferred. "Your place is interesting," my mother offered, clearly searching for something positive to say. "Did you paint these?" my father asked, gesturing to a series of digital illustrations framed on one wall, pieces from my recovery collection that had been particularly successful online. "Digital art," I corrected. "Yes, I created them during my recovery. They're actually selling quite well." "Oh," he said, surprise evident in his voice. That's good, Lydia." The awkward small talk continued as I offered them seats and water. Neither mentioned my cane propped against the wall, though I caught my mother's eyes lingering on it. Neither asked about my health or recovery. Neither acknowledged their year-long absence. I sat across from them, waiting. They hadn't flown to New York for pleasantries. Something had brought them here, something important enough to finally overcome all their commitments and travel difficulties. After about 20 minutes of superficial conversation, my mother's carefully maintained composure cracked. Tears filled her eyes, and her hand trembled as she set down her water glass. "It's Noah," she said, her voice breaking on his name. My stomach dropped. Despite everything, Noah was my brother. "What about Noah? Is he okay?" My father took over his attorney's composure, failing him as well. "Noah has been diagnosed with leukemia, acute myeloid leukemia. It's aggressive." The news hit me like a physical blow. Noah, the vibrant, athletic golden boy of the family with cancer. He was only 25. "When?" I managed to ask. 3 weeks ago," my father said. "He'd been feeling tired, bruising easily. We thought it was just stress from his new job. But then he got a nosebleed that wouldn't stop, and we took him to the ER. 3 weeks. They'd known for 3 weeks and were only telling me now. "Is he getting treatment?" "What's the prognosis?" I asked, my mind racing. He's started chemotherapy, my mother said, dabbing at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. But the doctors say… She couldn't continue. He needs a bone marrow transplant, my father finished for her. It's his best chance for long-term survival. I nodded slowly, beginning to understand why they were sitting in my living room after more than a year of absence. And you're here because… We've all been tested, my mother said. Your father and I, Emma, and her husband. None of us are matches. The doctors say siblings often have the highest chance of compatibility. And there it was, the real reason for their visit. You want me to get tested? I said flatly. It wasn't a question. Noah needs you, Lydia, my father said, leaning forward. You're his sister. This could save his life. Family has to stick together in times like these. My mother added a note of desperation in her voice. Blood is thicker than water after all. Is it? I asked quietly. Where was this family devotion when I was lying in a hospital bed for 3 months? Where was it during the year of recovery that followed? My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. That was different, my mother said dismissively. You had good medical care. You weren't in danger of dying. I laughed, a short, bitter sound that made them both flinch. I had a punctured lung, a fractured spine, and third-degree burns. I nearly died in that taxi. The doctors told you that. We had commitments we couldn't break. My father began the same excuse they'd used for over a year. And I suppose flying to New York to ask for my bone marrow isn't a commitment you can break either, I interrupted. How convenient that family obligation only works in one direction. My mother's expression hardened. After everything we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me? I asked, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. You didn't pay for my hospital bills. You didn't help with my recovery. You didn't even call regularly to check on me. We raised you, my father said indignantly. We put you through college. We've always been there for our children. For your children, I repeated. Just not for me. Not when I needed you most. My father shifted tactics, his lawyer instincts kicking in. Look, Lydia, I understand you're upset. We can discuss all of that later. Right now, Noah needs help. We're prepared to cover any expenses related to the testing and donation. We could even help with some of your outstanding medical bills if that would make things easier. The naked transactionalism of his offer stunned me into momentary silence. They weren't here because they suddenly cared about me. They weren't here because they regretted their absence during my crisis. They were here because they needed something only I could provide, and they were willing to pay for it. I need you to leave, I said quietly. Lydia, be reasonable, my mother pleaded. This is your brother's life we're talking about. I need time to think, I insisted. You can't show up after more than a year of silence and expect an immediate answer to something this significant. There isn't much time to waste, my father pressed. The sooner we can determine if you're a match. I said I need time, I repeated, standing up despite the pain that shot through my back with the sudden movement. I'll contact Noah's doctors directly, but right now I need you to leave. They looked ready to argue further, but something in my expression must have conveyed my resolve. My father stood first, placing a restraining hand on my mother's arm when she seemed prepared to continue pleading. At least promise you'll think about it, she said as they moved reluctantly toward the door. I'll think about it, I agreed. But not for you, for Noah. After they left, I collapsed onto my couch, tears I had refused to shed in their presence finally breaking free. The irony was almost too much to bear, that after everything they would only seek me out when they needed something from me, something only I could give. And yet beneath my anger and hurt concern for Noah, twisted like a knife. Whatever our relationship, whatever our parents had done or failed to do, he was my brother. He was facing a life-threatening illness. Could I really refuse to even get tested? But was I strong enough, physically and emotionally, to go through with donation if I was a match? The procedure would be painful, the recovery challenging, especially given my existing injuries and chronic pain. And could I bear to be around my parents through the process, to endure their conditional caring that would likely disappear again once Noah no longer needed my bone marrow? As the tears subsided, I reached for my phone and called the one person who had been there for me consistently through everything. "Maya," I said when she answered. "My parents just left my apartment. I need to talk." "They've got a lot of nerve," Maya fumed after I recounted my parents' visit. "We were on a video call, her indignation visible even through the screen. They ignore you for over a year, then show up expecting you to be their personal bone marrow bank. It's for Noah." I reminded her, though her outrage on my behalf felt validating. "He's the one who's sick." "And that's awful," Maya acknowledged. "Of course it is. But the way they approached you, Lydia, trying to guilt you, offering to pay your medical bills like it's some kind of transaction. That's not how family is supposed to work." She wasn't wrong. The calculated nature of their visit had left me feeling hollow. "What are you going to do?" she asked more gently. "I don't know yet," I admitted. "I need to learn more about what donation would involve, especially given my condition." After we ended our call, I spent hours researching bone marrow donation. The standard procedure, surgical extraction from the pelvic bone under general anesthesia, would be complicated by my spinal injury. Recovery typically took a week or two for healthy donors, but could be longer in my case. There would be pain fatigue and potential complications. My next call was to Dr. Rivera, the therapist I had been seeing since my discharge from the hospital. She agreed to an emergency session the following morning. "This is an incredibly complex situation," she said as I sat in her office having recounted my parents' visit. "There are no easy answers here." "I know," I sighed. "If I refuse and Noah doesn't find another donor, then that would be tragic," she finished gently. "But it wouldn't be your fault. Your parents' manipulation doesn't change the medical reality that donation carries risks, especially in your condition." "But if I can help him and choose not to?" "This is where we need to separate several different issues," Dr. Rivera said. "Your decision about potentially donating to Noah is separate from your relationship with your parents. You can choose to get tested for Noah's sake while still maintaining boundaries with your parents." I nodded slowly. "I keep thinking about lying in that hospital bed waiting for them to show up. Every day thinking, maybe today. And they never came." "That abandonment was real," she affirmed. "And the pain from it is valid. You don't have to pretend it didn't happen to be a good sister to Noah." "I barely know Noah anymore," I admitted. "We were never close as kids, and as adults we're practically strangers. Our parents made sure of that." "Have you spoken directly to Noah since his diagnosis?" I shook my head. "Only my parents." "That might be a place to start," she suggested. "Before you make any decisions about donation, perhaps you need to connect with Noah directly without your parents managing the narrative." The session helped clarify my thoughts, though the path forward remained challenging. Back at home, I called the hospital where Noah was being treated, asking to speak with his oncologist. After navigating the expected privacy concerns, I was able to arrange a consultation to discuss what donation would involve given my medical history. That night, I drafted a letter to my parents. If I was going to proceed, even just with testing, I needed to establish clear boundaries. The letter took hours to write, each word carefully chosen to be firm, but not vindictive. "I am willing to be tested as a potential donor for Noah," I wrote. "I am doing this for him, not for you. If I am a match and medically cleared to donate, I will proceed under the following conditions. 1. You will acknowledge directly and explicitly your abandonment during my accident and recovery. 2. You will respect my boundaries throughout this process. This includes not pressuring me, not using my donation as leverage in the future, and not controlling my relationship with Noah. 3. All communication regarding the medical aspects of donation will be directly between me and Noah's medical team. 4. Noah will be told the complete truth about everything, including your absence during my hospitalization and recovery. These conditions are non-negotiable. This is not about punishment or revenge. It is about establishing the honest foundation necessary for me to move forward." I ended the letter with my contact information and a request that they respect my need for space while I arranged for testing. After reading it over several times, I emailed it to both of them, then turned off my phone for the night. The next morning, I had 3 missed calls from my parents and 1 text message from an unknown number. Lydia, it's Noah. Mom and Dad told me they visited you. I had no idea about your accident last year. They said you were in a minor fender bender and didn't want visitors. I'm so sorry. Can we talk? This is my personal cell. The revelation wasn't entirely surprising. Of course, my parents had controlled the narrative, but seeing it confirmed still felt like a punch to the gut. They had actively lied to Noah about the severity of my accident. What else had they misrepresented over the years? I texted Noah back, agreeing to call him later that day. When we spoke, his voice sounded weaker than I remembered, but his personality, the genuine warmth that had made him everyone's favorite, came through clearly. I can't believe what happened to you, he said after we exchanged awkward greetings. Dad finally told me the truth after they got your email. A spinal fracture burns Lydia. Why didn't you tell me? I thought you knew. I said simply. I thought you had chosen not to come like they did. No, he insisted. They told me you had minor injuries and were busy with physical therapy and work, that you didn't want a fuss made. I sent that stupid text because I thought that's what you wanted. Space, not visitors. The conversation that followed was revelatory for both of us. Noah shared his shock at learning the full extent of my injuries and his hurt that our parents had kept us apart with their lies. I told him about my recovery, about the friends who had become family when our actual family was absent. I'm so sorry, he said repeatedly. I should have reached out directly. I should have verified what they were telling me. We both know how convincing they can be, I said, finding forgiveness easier for him than for our parents. How are you doing? Really? He didn't sugarcoat his condition. The diagnosis had been a shock. The chemotherapy was brutal. The search for a donor was becoming increasingly urgent. I understand if you don't want to get tested, he said toward the end of our call. After everything that's happened, everything they did, I wouldn't blame you. I've already scheduled the testing, I told him. I'm doing it tomorrow. Thank you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Whatever the result, just thank you for even considering it. That conversation was the first of many over the following week. As I waited for the test results, Noah and I began rebuilding the sibling relationship we had never really had, piecing together the ways our parents had kept us in separate orbits, competing for their approval, rather than supporting each other. Did you know they told me you were too busy to come to my college graduation? He asked during one late-night call. They told me you specifically requested a small family gathering with just them and Emma's family, I countered. Lie after lie emerged as we compared notes, creating a pattern too consistent to be coincidental. Our parents had systematically prevented their children from forming strong bonds with each other, ensuring that they remained the central relationship for each of us. When the test results came back, the news was both a relief and a new source of anxiety. I was a match for Noah. A very good match, in fact. The next step would be a complete medical evaluation to determine if I was healthy enough to donate given my injuries from the accident. I called Noah first with the news. The doctors still need to clear me, I cautioned. With my spinal injury, there could be complications. I understand, he said. I don't want you to risk your health, Lydia. Seriously. I scheduled the evaluation for the following week and finally returned my parents' increasingly urgent calls. The conversation was brief and to the point. Yes, I was a match. Yes, I was proceeding with the medical evaluation. No, I wasn't changing the conditions outlined in my email. We should discuss this in person, my father insisted. These kinds of conversations aren't appropriate for email or phone calls. I'll see you at the hospital for my evaluation, I said firmly. We can talk then, all of us, including Noah. The day of my medical evaluation arrived with a mix of spring rain and unexpected sunshine, fitting weather for the emotional storm and potential new beginning I was facing. I arrived at the hospital to find not just my parents waiting in the specialty clinic lobby, but Noah as well. He looked shockingly different from the vibrant young man I remembered, thinner, paler, his previously thick hair now sparse from the chemotherapy. But his smile when he saw me was genuine, lighting up his face with the familiar warmth that had always made him everyone's favorite. You came, he said, standing carefully to embrace me. I noticed he used the IV pole beside his chair for support. Of course I did, I replied, returning his hug gently, conscious of both his fragility and my own still healing body. My parents stood awkwardly to the side, tension evident in their rigid postures. My mother had clearly made an effort with her appearance, her makeup perfect despite the dark circles under her eyes. My father looked older than he had just weeks ago, the strain of Noah's illness etched into new lines on his face. "Lydia," my mother began, stepping forward, "we want to talk about your email." "Not now," Noah interrupted, surprising all of us with his firmness. "Lydia's here for her medical evaluation. That's what matters right now." The nurse called my name before my parents could respond, and I followed her into the examination room, leaving the family dynamics temporarily behind. The evaluation was thorough. Blood tests, heart and lung function assessments, detailed questions about my accident and ongoing recovery. "I want to be completely honest with you," Dr. Abrams, the transplant specialist, said after reviewing my medical records. "Donation would be more challenging in your case than for a typical donor. The standard procedure involves extracting marrow from the pelvic bone, which would put stress on your spinal injury. Recovery could be more difficult and potentially longer." "But it's possible?" I asked. "Yes," he confirmed. "With proper precautions and an extended recovery period, it's possible, but I want you to understand the risks before you make your decision." He outlined the potential complications: increased pain, temporary mobility issues, possible setbacks to the progress I'd made in my recovery. The procedure itself would be safe, but the aftermath would be more challenging for me than for most donors. "Take some time to think about it," he advised. "This is a significant decision with real physical consequences for you." When I returned to the waiting area, Noah was alone, my parents having apparently gone to the cafeteria. "That took a while," he said, patting the seat next to him. "How did it go?" I sat beside him, summarizing what Dr. Abrams had told me. "It's more complicated because of my back, but doable." Noah frowned. "That sounds rough, Lydia. Are you sure you want to go through with this? There's still the donor registry." "The registry could take too long," I interrupted gently. "And there's no guarantee they'd find as good a match. I want to do this, Noah. I just need to make sure everyone understands what it means." He reached for my hand, squeezing it with what strength he could muster. "I understand what it means, and I'm grateful. More than I can say." We sat in companionable silence until our parents returned, coffee cups in hand, and tension still evident in their postures. "The doctor says I can donate," I said before they could speak. "But there are increased risks because of my injuries from the accident." My mother's relief was visible. "That's wonderful news, Lydia. We're so grateful." "I'm not finished," I said firmly. "Before I commit to this, we need to talk. All of us together, honestly." My father glanced around the public waiting room. "Perhaps this isn't the best place." "It's exactly the right place," I countered. "Neutral ground, and Noah needs to be part of this conversation." Noah nodded his agreement. "I want to hear what Lydia has to say." Faced with our united front, our parents reluctantly sat down across from us. "I've learned a lot in the past week." I began, looking directly at them. "Noah and I have been talking, really talking, for the first time in years. We've discovered how many lies you've told to keep us apart, how you've manipulated our perceptions of each other." "That's not fair," my mother protested. "We never—" "You told Noah I had a minor fender bender when I nearly died in that taxi," I interrupted. "You told him I was too busy for his graduation when I was never even invited. You've systematically prevented us from having a real sibling relationship." My father started to object, but Noah held up his hand. "Let her finish, Dad. She's right and you know it." I continued, laying out the pattern we had uncovered. The ways they had controlled information, created competition instead of cooperation, maintained their position as the central relationship in our lives by weakening the bonds between their children. "And when I needed you most," I concluded, "when I was lying in a hospital bed for months, you chose not to come. Not once." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken emotions. My mother looked away, her lips pressed into a thin line. My father stared at his hands. "I'm willing to be a donor," I said finally. "But I need acknowledgement of these patterns. I need a genuine apology, not excuses. And I need a commitment to change." "What exactly are you asking for?" My father inquired, his lawyer's instinct to clarify terms asserting itself. I'm asking for honesty, I replied simply. I'm asking you to admit what you've done. To me, to Noah, to our family. I'm asking for a real apology, not a transaction where you're only sorry because you need something from me. And I'm asking for family therapy if we're going to have any relationship moving forward. This is ridiculous, my mother began but stopped short when Noah spoke. It's not ridiculous, he said quietly. Lydia's right, about all of it. I've seen the text messages, the emails where you misrepresented what she said, what I said. I've realized how you've always pitted us against each other, and I've been trying to understand why you never told me how serious her accident was. My mother's composure cracked. We were trying to protect you, she insisted. You were in your final semester with internships lined up. We didn't want to worry you with something you couldn't do anything about anyway. That wasn't your decision to make, Noah replied firmly. She's my sister. I had a right to know. My father cleared his throat. We made choices we thought were best for the family. Best for you, I corrected. Best for maintaining your control over your children. Best for preserving the family image you wanted to project. To my surprise, it was my father who broke first. His shoulders slumped, and when he looked up, there were tears in his eyes, something I had never seen before. You're right, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I was wrong. We should have been there for you, Lydia. There's no excuse for not coming to the hospital, for not helping during your recovery. And you're right about the patterns, too. We've always, he hesitated, managed our children's relationships with each other. It was wrong. My mother stared at him in shock. Richard? No, Catherine, he interrupted. It's time for honesty. Lydia nearly died and we didn't go to her. What kind of parents does that make us? And now we're here asking her to undergo a painful procedure to help Noah after we abandoned her during her own crisis. She deserves better. Both our children deserve better. The raw honesty of his admissions stunned me into silence. In all my preparation for this confrontation, I had never expected my father to be the one to acknowledge the truth so plainly. My mother's perfectly maintained facade finally crumbled. Tears streaked her makeup as she looked from my father to Noah to me. I don't know how to do this, she admitted, her voice small. I don't know how to apologize for something this big. I don't know how to fix it. You start by being honest, Noah said gently. Like Dad just was. She nodded, taking a shaky breath. I was wrong, she said finally, looking directly at me. We were wrong not to come when you were hurt. There's no excuse, even though we've made so many. And you're right about how we've managed your relationships with each other. I never thought of it as manipulation, but that's what it was. It wasn't a perfect apology. It didn't erase the hurt or instantly repair the damage. But it was a beginning, the first crack in the wall of denial that had characterized our family for so long. What happens now? My father asked after we had all sat in silence for a moment, absorbing the weight of these first steps toward honesty. Now we move forward with the donation process, I said. And we start family therapy, all of us. My parents nodded their agreement, looking both relieved and apprehensive. Noah reached for my hand again, a silent gesture of solidarity that meant more than words could express. As we scheduled the donation procedure and made arrangements for the preliminary therapist appointment, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but the possibility of forgiveness. The beginning of a new kind of relationship built on truth rather than appearances, on genuine connection rather than controlled narratives. The road ahead would be difficult in many ways, physically for both Noah and me, emotionally for our entire family, as we confronted long-established patterns. But for the first time, we would be walking that road together, eyes open to both the pain of the past and the potential of the future. The bone marrow donation procedure was scheduled for 2 weeks later, giving me time to prepare both physically and emotionally. Maya helped me arrange my apartment for the recovery period, moving essential items within easy reach, and setting up a comfortable sleeping area in the living room for when climbing to the bedroom might be too challenging. I still can't believe you're doing this, she said as we reorganized my kitchen cabinets to make necessities more accessible. After everything they put you through. I'm not doing it for them, I reminded her. I'm doing it for Noah, and for myself in a way. What do you mean? I considered the question carefully. I need to know that I made this choice from a place of strength, not obligation. That I could look at all the hurt and still choose compassion. That their failures as parents don't determine what kind of sister I want to be. The morning of the procedure arrived with a mixture of anxiety and resolve. Maya drove me to the hospital where Noah was already admitted in preparation for receiving the transplant once my bone marrow was harvested. I'll be fine, I assured her as she fretted over my hospital bag. The doctors know what they're doing. It's not the doctors I'm worried about, she muttered, casting a dark look toward the waiting area where my parents sat anxiously. It's the vultures who only showed up when they needed something from you. They're trying, I said, surprising myself with the defense. The therapy sessions have been illuminating. We had managed 2 family therapy appointments in the weeks leading up to the donation. While hardly sufficient to undo decades of dysfunction, they had established a foundation for more honest communication. My parents had struggled with the therapist's direct approach, but had remained committed to the process. My mother approached cautiously as a nurse prepared to take me to pre-op. Lydia, she said, her usual confidence absent. I just wanted to say, thank you, and I'm sorry, for everything. The words still sounded awkward coming from her, but I recognized the effort they represented. I know, I replied simply. My father stood beside her looking older and more vulnerable than I had ever seen him. We'll be here when you wake up, he promised. The whole time. I nodded, not quite trusting myself to speak. The contrast between this moment and my accident was stark. My parents in the waiting room, instead of absent, their concern genuine instead of performative. The nurse wheeled me toward the double doors that led to the surgical area, stopping briefly beside Noah's room. He was connected to various monitors, his body prepared for the intensive process of receiving the transplant. But he managed a smile when he saw me. Hey, donor, he said weakly. Hey, recipient, I replied with forced lightness. See you on the other side, he said, reaching out his hand. I grasped it briefly, this new connection between us stronger than I would have believed possible just weeks ago. The procedure itself was both more and less difficult than I had anticipated. The physical pain was significant, especially given my existing spinal injury, but the medical team was attentive and proactive about managing it. The emotional dimension, knowing that part of my body was being given to my brother, possibly saving his life, was more overwhelming than I had expected. When I woke in the recovery room groggy and disoriented, the first face I saw was my mother's. She was sitting beside my bed, her perfect posture abandoned as she leaned forward anxiously. You're awake, she said, relief evident in her voice. How do you feel? Like someone drilled into my hip, I mumbled. Which I guess they did. The doctor said everything went perfectly, she assured me. They got exactly what they needed for Noah. I tried to nod but winced as pain shot through my back. How is he? Receiving the transplant now, she said. Your father is with him. As the anesthesia wore off, the pain intensified. The combination of the extraction site in my hip and the strain on my already damaged spine created waves of discomfort that the medication only partially dulled. Moving was excruciating. Even slight adjustments in position sent spasms through my back. True to their word, my parents remained at the hospital. They took turns sitting with me and Noah, keeping us updated on each other's progress. It was the kind of attentiveness I had craved during my accident recovery. Not perfect, sometimes awkward, but present. The days that followed were challenging. The doctors had warned me that my recovery would be complicated by my pre-existing injuries, but the reality was still difficult to endure. Simple tasks like getting to the bathroom or changing position in bed required assistance and triggered waves of pain. Maya coordinated a schedule with my coworkers and friends, ensuring I had support beyond my parents. She didn't fully trust them yet. Actions over time, not words in a crisis, she reminded me. But she recognized their efforts. Noah's response to the transplant was cautiously positive. His body didn't reject the marrow, the first crucial hurdle. The process of rebuilding his immune system would be long and precarious, but the initial signs were encouraging. On my third day post-procedure, when I was stable enough to be moved, the nurses arranged for me to visit Noah's isolation room. Masked and gowned to protect his compromised immune system, I was wheeled to his bedside. "My hero," he said with a weak smile, reaching for my hand. "Don't make it weird," I joked, though tears pricked at my eyes. "How are you really doing?" he asked, his gaze taking in the pain evident in my posture despite the medication. "I've been better," I admitted. "But I've been worse too. This will pass." "Thank you," he said simply. "Not just for this, for being willing to rebuild our relationship after everything, for giving me a chance to know my sister." "We have a lot of time to make up for," I replied. My father cleared his throat from the doorway where he stood watching us. "That's on us," he said quietly. "And we have a lot to make up for too." My mother nodded beside him. "We do." It was a small moment but significant. An acknowledgement without excuses, a taking of responsibility without deflection. The following week brought gradual improvement for both Noah and me. I was discharged with strict recovery instructions and a physical therapy regimen. Noah remained hospitalized but continued to show positive signs. My parents divided their time between his hospital room and my apartment, where they awkwardly but earnestly attempted to help with my recovery. "You don't have to hover," I told my mother after she rearranged my pill organizer for the third time in an hour. "I've been managing on my own for a long time." "I know," she said, setting down the medication with a sigh. I don't know how to do this, Lydia. How to be helpful without overstepping. How to make up for not being there before." "You can start by asking what I need instead of assuming," I suggested. "And by understanding that trust is rebuilt slowly. This doesn't erase the past." She nodded, a new humility in her expression. "I understand. What do you need right now?" It was a simple question, but one she had rarely asked before. "Right now, I need to rest. And maybe some tea before you go." She smiled tentatively. "That I can do." These small interactions gradually accumulated, creating a new pattern in our relationship. It wasn't perfect. Old habits emerged, old tensions flared. But the framework established in our therapy sessions provided tools for addressing these moments more constructively. My father struggled more visibly with the new dynamic. Accustomed to being the authority, the decision-maker, he found himself uncertain in this new territory of emotional honesty. "I don't know how to do this," he confessed during one particularly difficult therapy session. "I've spent my entire career being certain, being right. I don't know how to be vulnerable." "None of us are experts at this," I told him. "We're all learning." As the weeks passed and my strength gradually returned, I began working on a new series of digital illustrations. The theme emerged organically: transformation, healing, the complex beauty of broken things repaired. The work was different from anything I had created before, drawing directly from the emotional journey of the past months. Noah was discharged 6 weeks after the transplant, though his recovery would continue for months. He moved temporarily into our parents' home in Boston, where they had converted the ground floor guest room into a recovery suite. I visited when I was strong enough to travel our new sibling relationship, developing through long conversations about shared experiences and different perspectives. "Did you know they never came to any of my baseball games unless they were championships?" he revealed during one of these talks. "All those times they said they were rearranging schedules for my games. They sent their assistants to the regular ones." "I always thought you were the favorite," I admitted. "That they were there for everything you did." He shook his head. "They were there for the public moments, the ones that fit the image. The rest of the time I had coaches and drivers and tutors." These revelations didn't excuse their behavior toward me, but they provided context. Their perfectionism, their obsession with achievement and appearances had damaged all their children, just in different ways. 3 months after the donation, I held the opening for my new exhibition at a small but respected gallery in Brooklyn. titled Marrow on Breaking and Mending. It featured the work I had created during my recovery from both the accident and the donation. To my surprise, my parents attended. They seemed out of place among the artistic crowd, my father stiff in his tailored suit, my mother overdressed for the casual atmosphere. But they came. They looked at every piece. They listened as I explained my artistic process to other attendees. "This is really remarkable, Lydia," my father said, standing before a particularly emotional piece that depicted the moment of awakening after my accident. "I never understood your art before. I never tried to." "It's not too late to start," I replied. My mother touched my arm hesitantly. "We're very proud of you. I know we haven't said that enough, or at all, but we are." The words meant more than I wanted to admit, though I recognized the need to keep them in perspective. One art show attendance, one expression of pride didn't erase years of dismissal and absence, but it was a step. Noah continued to improve, though the road to full recovery was long and uncertain. My own healing progressed as well, both physically and emotionally. The donation had set back my recovery from the accident, requiring months of additional physical therapy, but I gradually regained the ground I had lost. More importantly, I gained clarity about my boundaries, my worth, and what kind of relationship I wanted with my family moving forward. I would never again accept being the forgotten middle child, the afterthought, the one whose crisis didn't merit attention. I would never again measure my value by their approval or lack thereof. 1 year after Noah's diagnosis, we gathered at my parents' home in Boston for a small celebration of his remission. Emma was there with her children, the family together in a way that felt both familiar and entirely new. "A toast," my father said, raising his glass, "to Noah's health, to second chances, and to Lydia, without whom we wouldn't be here today." "To Lydia," everyone echoed. I accepted their acknowledgement with a small smile, aware of how much had changed and how much remained the same. My parents were trying in their imperfect way. Noah and I had built a genuine sibling bond. Emma and I were cautiously developing a relationship that wasn't defined by competition. But the most profound change was within myself. I had learned that family is both blood and choice, that forgiveness doesn't require forgetting, that standing up for yourself can coexist with compassion for others, that boundaries are not walls but necessary definitions of healthy relationships. As I looked around the table at these people connected to me by both genetics and complex history, I recognized that healing doesn't mean returning to what was before. It means creating something new from the broken pieces, something that honors both the scars and the strength it took to survive them. "I have something to share," I said when there was a lull in the conversation. "I've been offered a position as artist-in-residence at a recovery center for trauma survivors. My work with accident victims during my own recovery has led to this opportunity." "That's wonderful," Noah said immediately. "Your art helped me so much during treatment. I can imagine how powerful it would be for others going through trauma." My parents exchanged glances. In the past, they would have immediately questioned the practicality, the financial stability, the prestige of such a choice. Today, my father simply asked, "When do you start?" "Next month," I replied. "It's part-time, so I'll keep my design work too, but it feels like the right next step." "We're proud of you," my mother said, the phrase still sounding somewhat new on her lips. "You found a way to turn your experience into something meaningful for others." Their support, while welcome, was no longer the validation I sought. I had learned to find that within myself, to trust my own judgment, to value my own path. That was perhaps the greatest gift of this difficult journey, the knowledge that my worth wasn't determined by their recognition of it. Later, as Noah and I sat on the porch watching the sunset, he asked quietly, "Are you happy, Lydia, with how things are now?" I considered the question carefully. "I'm at peace," I finally answered. "I've accepted that our parents will never be perfect, that our family will always be a work in progress, that healing isn't linear or complete." "But you don't regret the donation getting tested even after everything they did?" "No," I said honestly. "That decision wasn't about them. It was about you, about the kind of person I want to be. about not letting their failures determine my choices. He nodded, understanding. You saved my life, you know. Not just with your bone marrow, with your honesty, with forcing us all to face the truth. I smiled, watching the colors change in the evening sky. Maybe we saved each other. The journey of the past year had taught me that sometimes the worst experiences reveal who truly loves you, and sometimes they reveal your own capacity for love even in the face of hurt. That reconciliation doesn't require erasing the past, but honestly confronting it. That moving forward means walking with eyes open, both guarded and hopeful. My family would never be perfect. The damage of years couldn't be undone in months. But we were learning a new way to be family. More honest, more equal, more aware of both our connections and our separate identities. And that, imperfect as it was enough to build upon. Have you ever had to draw a line with family you loved? Share your experience in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if this story resonated with you. Hit that like button if you've ever had to find the balance between compassion and self-protection in a difficult family situation. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to set boundaries with family. Remember, sometimes the bravest thing isn't saving someone else, it's saving yourself first. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you find the courage to write your own path to healing.